Okay, good afternoon, everybody. This is the Tuesday, March 18th meeting of the Transportation Parking Commission. My name is Donna Lascalia. I'm the Director of Public Works. I'm also the chair of this commission. I believe everyone who's on the commission has been made a co-host. So hopefully that's the case. Beth, if you are ready, please call the roll.
DPW Director Donna Lascalia.
Here.
Police Chief John Cartledge.
Here.
Director of Planning and Sustainability Carolyn Mish.
Here.
Parking Enforcement Administrator Nancy Forrestal. Nancy, it looks like you're here. Are you here?
Now I'm here. Thank you.
Okay. Alex Jarrett. Not here. Deborah Clemmer.
Here.
Deb and Bruce.
Here.
Diana Foskett. Jamie Albro Fisher.
Here.
Randy Saylor.
Here.
Welcome.
Okay,
You've got eight members present.
Thank you, Beth, and a special welcome to Randy Saylor, who's the newest member of the commission. So thanks for being with us, Randy, and appreciate having you on board.
Thank you.
Okay, so this meeting is being audio and video recorded. First up is public comment. This is your time to speak to the commission on any matter which you wish. I do ask, if you're here for a specific agenda item, to hold your comments until we actually hit that agenda item. It just makes for a more orderly meeting. Okay, sorry about that. I think I'm having some technical issues on my end. But if you could hold your comments for agenda items until we get to that agenda item, it makes for a more orderly meeting. But in the meantime, if there's anyone here to speak to something that it is not on the agenda, please do so now. Raise your hand, and we give you 2 minutes. I just need your name and city or town of residence, if you could, please. So first up is Alex Bowman.
My video is disabled, but that's okay. I emailed the members of the commission with city email addresses, some research that I had found on the mass.gov site regarding procedural changes of speed limits. And there's one particular speed calming tool that it does not appear that the city is using, nor does it include it in its speed calming guide, which is the safety zone, which allows for a the city to set a regulatory 20 mile per hour limit in a specific zone where the street is adjacent to land use that is likely to attract vulnerable road users. The safety zone should contain one or more areas that have potential conflicts between motor vehicles and vulnerable road users that warrant a reduction in speeds, such as crosswalks, driveways, and side streets. And the minimum length of the safety zone should be a quarter mile. They suggest that these can be used in areas where vulnerable road users are likely to be present, such as parks and playgrounds, senior citizen housing and centers, hospitals and other medical facilities, high schools, and higher education centers and daycare facilities. I know other cities like Cambridge, Massachusetts have used these widely. In fact, Cambridge has installed more than 600 of these signs. And it seems like a great tool that this city could use in a number of areas. And I don't know if it was missed or if it was chosen not to be used, but I would love to have some discussion at some point from the Transportation Parking Commission about why this is not an option for the traffic calming requests. It does seem to be a great option that has been used successfully in other places. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Alan. Just, Alex, just your city or town of residence, please.
Northampton.
Thank you. Okay, next is Danny.
Hello. Hi. My name is Danny McCann. I live on Perkins Avenue in Northampton. And I've been part of this a group of people in a community group, Strong Towns Northampton, that's been talking a lot lately about the Elm Street redesign and where that's at. A few folks made comments at the December meeting. I was a little bit surprised that it's not on the agenda. I was under the understanding, based on some conversations I had had, that it's actually like around 75% complete. So I was wondering if we could get an update. But in the meanwhile, I sort of got myself up to speed on the basis of the design. I went back and read the Fuss and O'Neill study. And I think that, just sort of a main takeaway for me is that I think that they really kind of did us a disservice. We asked them to look at this area for pedestrian and cycling safety, and they spent really most of the study focusing on level of service or vehicle throughput, and then kind of came up with some recommendations based mainly on that, and then kind of came back and addressed bicycling and pedestrians after that, so the driving thing in their design seems to be level of service, which is sort of an increasingly outdated way of, allowing our streets to be redesigned, because it doesn't really consider anything other than cars in it. Doesn't consider alternative transportation. So, I think that it might merit, because changes have been made to the way these studies are being done, to kind of go back and revisit and look at the basis of our design, and maybe even consider some of the things that were rejected originally, since those things take a long time, but they may in fact result in better outcomes.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Next is Barbara.
Hello. My name is Barbara Ferranti Bricker. I'm in Ward 7 on Meadow Street in Florence. My transportation interest came from Meadow Street Florence's collaboration with the DPW, which resulted in several successful changes on Meadow Street and Spring Street. I am now a member of Strong Towns and learning more every day. Regarding the Elm Street proposal, Strong Towns is joining with others to modify and understand the principles of the Fuss and O'Neill's plan. The use of more updated and detailed information seems to have been neglected in their proposal. The significant costs and long-term effects of the project warrant an effort by the city, with or without Fuss and O'Neill, to review fact-based submissions. Strong Towns' resources and thinking may be useful to the city. We are poised to be an ally with resources to help make the city a leader in multimodal mobility and safety. Communicate with us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Barbara. Anyone else for public comment? Beth, could you please have the record reflect that Diana Day arrived at 4:08? Thank you. All right, one more call. One more call for public comment. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to the approval of minutes from a previous meeting, which was January 21st, 2025. May I have a motion for a approval, please?
I move to approve.
Okay, it's Councilor Clemmer. May I have a second?
Second.
Okay, second from Carolyn. Is there any discussion on the minutes from January 21st? Okay, hearing none. Beth, if you could please call the roll.
Donna,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Carolyn.
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Alex, you're still not here.
He might be.
Deborah,
Yes.
Devin,
Abstain.
Diana,
Yes.
Jamie,
Yes.
Randy. Probably didn't get them.
I did not get them. So I guess I have to abstain.
That's 7 yeses and 2 abstentions. And yeah,
Okay, thank you, Beth. Next up is reports from departments and subcommittees and announcement. I have a couple from the DPW. The construction plans for this year's mill and overlay project are in development. There was a list of streets to be paved that was announced by Mayor Shara at City Council. We are working currently on coordination with the gas company. Gas company has quite a bit of work to do on many of the streets that we intend to pave. So we're working through some scheduling with them, and I'll be in touch when I have further details on that. The Northampton bikeway resurfacing. So as most of you may be aware, we repaved the bike path all the way from Stoddard Street up to Bridge Road. And Warner Brothers will be remobilizing in early April for intersection work, paint, signage, and other tasks necessary to complete the project. The good news on this is that a closure of the trail will not be necessary. But they will be coning off particular areas of the path that they are working on, but it will not restrict movement in the way that it did when we were paving it. So that's DPW updates. Anything from planning or anyone else? Devin, go ahead.
I don't have anything.
Okay, sorry, I saw your hand up.
I know I'm trying to lower that hand.
Okay, yeah. All right, Carolyn, go ahead.
Just wanted to let people know that we had our pre-construction meeting with MassDOT today for the construction of the new shared use path connector from East Hampton Road, the Northampton New Haven Rail Trail across country to Route 66. I don't have a construction start date yet, but they have been the contractor has been given the notice to proceed, so they're working on procurement for the project and should be starting sometime maybe in April, but don't have an exact date yet. And that's it. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Carolyn. Anyone else have any updates for us? Okay, hearing none. Again, a warm welcome to Randy Saylor, who has joined the commission. This is his first meeting. So again, thank you for being here with us, Randy. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
So next up, we'll move to matters before the commission. First is a discussion of parking in the area of 227 South Street. So we receive many parking requests that come in through our online portal. This parking request was submitted in September of 2024. The residents concerned said that they had closed a curb cut and 2 additional on-street spaces now fit. So if we could move in the shared screen to a street view of the area. The reason that we have brought this to this commission is because there are a lot of different options here. So we wanted to have a public discussion around what those options might be and what the best way is to move forward. So I have a couple of comments based on the photo in front of you. And then I will also ask for public comment. The road width in this area is approximately 47 feet wide. So right now there are 2 existing painted parking spaces with a 2-hour time limit. The other marked spaces on South Street do not have a time limit. There is certainly sufficient footage to install parking in a different way here, like we have the length in the street. In fact, if you were to look at a Google Street View from 2013, there used to be 3 painted spaces in this area without limited time signs. So at some point, a decision was made to limit the time people could park here. And it's unclear to me what the history is on that, which is why I wanted to have a public discussion around this. So again, we do have a couple of different options given the new closed curb cut. So we could install a 22-foot long space, or two 20-foot long spaces, and then a decision needs to be made on if we are going to limit time here or not. So that's my narrative around this. I don't know if there's anyone here from the public who has any more context for us, or anyone who has any comments. Danny, I see your hand up, so go ahead, please.
Hello. Yes, I actually manage this property. Residents would like to be able to park here, so I think the time limited piece of that, if that could go away. Sorry, I see a request to start my video. If the time limited piece of that could go away, the residents would be thrilled.
Okay, good. Thank you for the context. I appreciate that. Not sure if Carolyn, go ahead. See your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't look at the dates or when the time limit might have been adopted, but I'm wondering if it goes back to when there was a veterinary practice there and there was maybe a request for, you know, patrons, people coming for that practice. And since that practice isn't there anymore, it might make sense to reevaluate whether there's a time limit or not.
Yeah, thanks, Carolyn. Again, this is, I think, why I wanted to have a public discussion around this. Randy, are you raising your hand?
Yes, I am.
Okay, go ahead.
So that street is super wide, if I'm not mistaken, relatively to what's going on in that street. I'm wondering if there's a way to think about making it a safer place for bike lanes by using parking protected bike lanes in that area, or as at least an experiment to use parking protected bike lanes in that area where the cars would be farther from the curb, and then the bicycle area would be between the parked cars and the curb. I think I've seen that in use in a lot of places. It certainly makes folks feel a lot better riding their bikes on a busy road. And it seems like there's a fairly long piece of South Street, and I haven't sort of measured, because I just heard about it, but I haven't gone and measured all that to look at how long, but even some would be better than nothing and move us to a better place in terms of parking, in terms of safer biking for our residents.
Thanks, Randy. Devin, go ahead.
I live off of South Street and I'm absolutely in favor of there being parking on the sides. So I want to increase the parking there, partly because the street is so wide that if there's a turning car, the cars deviate around that car into that area you're looking at. So for that reason, parking is really valuable there to slow down traffic. I'm a little cautious about putting a protected bike lane for a little while and not doing it elsewhere, because you're going to have a confusing pattern for the bicyclist and they'll be weaving in and out of the view of the drivers. But you can consider that if you want, but that's my first thought.
Okay, thanks, Devin. Go ahead, Carolyn.
I was just going to ask, what's the length of South Street that we're evaluating now, or going to be evaluating for, that we've discussed with MassDOT?
It's about 50
is it
feet.
the whole section?
Yeah, it's about 50 feet.
Oh, it's not going from the bridge to the intersection?
No, this is just in front of 227.
No. I mean, just sort of looking at the bigger scheme. So if we were to consider long-term designing the whole corridor with bike protected parking, you know, could that be part of that larger scenario that we're looking at? And I just didn't remember which section of South Street, because I agree with what Devin's saying. We wouldn't want to institute it now for a short section, but given that we may be looking at the entire corridor, that may be something we do in the long term.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question. Yes,
Yeah.
so we have initiated a TIP project to reconstruct South Street, which is going to run from the intersection of New South, where Old South turns off and goes all the way to the bridge beyond South Park Tower. So it would basically be the entire stretch of South Street. And yes, at that time, we could certainly look at embedded bike lanes. Okay, Jamie, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna echo the comments. The time limits on those spots, I believe, do go back to when the veterinary practice was there. I've been in the neighborhood a long time, and I certainly support removing those. I don't think there's any other time limits in that area of South Street. So it is kind of inconsistent at this point now that there's no business there. And adding the spaces, extra 2 spaces makes sense to me too.
Okay. Thanks, Jamie. Devin, go ahead.
I did think you were due to resurface South Street at some point. Further into town at Monroe and Columbus, it's falling apart. So I'm happy to hear that's on the future. And it does seem like that's the time to consider really restructuring the bike lane.
It is. We're going to have to stabilize that area in advance of any TIP project. We're losing it faster than we can reconstruct it. So yes, but agreed. So it sounds like, based on this conversation, Nancy, go ahead. I see your actual hand up.
I remember when we made the change here, and that was a direct result of that driveway into the veterinary practice. We removed a parking spot so that people could see pulling in and out. And also the 2 hours were put in place because of the veterinary practice. So it's based upon a non-existent business now. And I would fully support going ahead and turning this into unlimited, not time-oriented parking spots, because, you know, we can still enforce anybody who's parking beyond 72 hours anyway. So we do have a fallback ordinance in place.
Okay, thank you for those comments. So just another comment from me. We do need to be mindful that there is a driveway to the east, driveway 221. So when we think about how many spaces we're going to add here, we do have to be mindful of the driveway at 221 and what will the distance off the driveway to the new parking spaces be. So based on the space that we have to work with, which was roughly 49 feet, our options are that we can create one 22-foot long parking space, and there will be 27 feet of clearance off of the driveway for visibility, or we can install two 20-foot long spaces, but there will only be 9 feet of clearance off of that driveway. So I don't know if anyone has any comments on that just from a visibility and convenience standpoint, because we obviously need to balance, you know, the need for parking with the need for visibility. Randy, go ahead.
Like, it seems to me
I
that
would,
it would make sense to have the 2 spaces with 9 feet. I mean, that visibility is for, you need visibility across the street, right, from west or eastbound traffic. So you've got a little bit more room if you needed to pull out to check the the inbound traffic.
Yeah, Randy, go ahead. Were you, did you have something for us?
yeah. Again, I would like to say, I would like to encourage possible experimentation with some parking. I appreciate the consideration that will be in the tips, but this is an area of maybe a little bit longer than that that's going to get some road painting apparently, if this is done. And I would like to encourage the exploration or the experimentation with parking protected biking, at least in some section of this area. And also, I'm wondering why we need to have marked spaces along this street. What's the benefit of having specifically delineated spaces along this street when there's a fairly large stretch, you know, parking between things, you know, parking between signs happens regularly. So I don't understand necessarily the need for marked parking spaces.
Yeah, in general, we mark parking spaces proximate to central business districts. So in general, we don't go out and mark parking spaces like in neighborhoods, but the closer we get into a central business district, we try to bring some level of order to how people are parking on the side of the road. I think historically, because there was a business here, that's likely why it was striped. So, sometimes it's historical and sometimes it's actually intentional. Jamie, go ahead. Your hand is raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo Randy's idea about the protected bike lane. I mean, when you look, and maybe this requires a separate motion, so help us with the process here. But if we were to do that, you would just want to include the same treatment for the other spaces heading towards town just before that crosswalk, and then you'd have that whole stretch protected by the parking. Worthy idea, I'd say.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. I mean, this particular stretch, we're looking at kind of this 49-foot, so I'm calling it 50 feet of just sort of dead stretch. What are we going to do? Are we going to put parking spaces in here? And if so, 1 or 2. If we want to start thinking about experimentation and shifting the bike lane, that's going to require us to grind out the existing pavement markings and then remark it so that we can communicate with everybody what they're doing. So now the question is, we have to communicate with cars where they're supposed to be, with parking, with cars that are parking where they're supposed to be, and then with bicyclists where they're supposed to be. So now we have to look at what is the overall length that we're doing this experimentation for. It wouldn't be 49 feet. We would actually, you would need to do it for a much longer stretch than that. You don't just want, a couple of cars out in the middle of the street and then everyone sort of, reverts back to normal traffic flow. So I think we would have to have a larger conversation about what sort of experimentation are we going to do and what is the limit of that experimentation. I personally would not support something that's only a couple of 100 feet long. I think it's going to be confusing to drivers, and it's going to be it's going to create more safety issues than it solves. That's just my sort of personal opinion on this. At first blush, I would want to do 1,000, 1,500 feet, so that people sort of get used to the traffic pattern, and I think that'd be safer for everyone. I don't know, Carolyn, do you have any comments on that? It just around sort of best practices around something like this?
In terms of a distance, no, but I think it would be complicated if you just have a block where cars are projected, parking, close to the right up next to the drive lane, and then other sections on the same side are parked at the curb. So it would obviously take more of an effort, as opposed to sort of looking at the entire corridor. I don't know what that, I don't know what that magic number is, but I think if it certainly is, if you're creating I think my assessment would be you create a cohesive picture for an entire stretch, a corridor, and know that on this corridor, you have bike protected parking, essentially buffered parking, buffered bike lane with parking.
Yeah, thanks, Carolyn. Nancy, go ahead.
A couple of things. Anytime that we have a busy roadway, let's take Elm Street for example. If you don't have marked spaces, people are going to park right on top of the driveways. So we really need to have these as marked spaces. They're easier to enforce. And anytime you don't have a marked space and you leave too much room, somebody's going to try and tuck their way into there. So I think that leaving 9 feet is a good idea. So let's go with my opinion would be to go with the 2 spaces.
Thanks, Nancy. Is anyone, Alex, I see your hand. I just want to kind of go around the commission here, but before I take more public comment. Randy, I see your actual hand up. Go ahead.
I guess I would agree with Jamie. Maybe this isn't the place to get further into what we can do to protect bike lanes, but if you can help us, I'd like to figure out how we can put this on the agenda for a future meeting. That Jamie's suggestion, I think, is a good one, and get some more info. We see a sketch of about 50 feet here. We don't have the large data. Quite a number of us, if not all of us, have driven that area, and so we're somewhat familiar with it. But it would be nice to have sort of a directed discussion of what's possible and what's going to happen with the rebuilding of that road in the near future. So I would be happy to make a motion like that. I'm not sure the form that you prefer it, Donna.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. And I think the suggestion is a good one. There would be no need for a motion. We would just put it on a future agenda to maybe identify, particular locations in the city. I don't want to go too far afield off our agenda item here, but we could certainly discuss it for a future agenda.
Well, this area specifically, since we brought it up, I mean, that's what we're talking about. So I would like to see it on a future agenda with supporting materials, so we have maps or whatever we need to envision what this may look like, and some of the difficulties or advantages of doing making any changes to this area. It would certainly get us ready to think about future redesign if that's where we were going, and rebuilding of the road and what we might want to see in that area.
Okay, thanks, Randy. Devin, did you have your hand up?
No, it keeps popping up on me on its own, but I would say that I'm in favor of 2 parking places, and I think if you're ready for me to, I'd be happy to make that motion.
Actually, Devin, this was my intention this afternoon was to just have a discussion around this for exactly the reasons that we've brought up here, and we will be back with an ordinance based on the discussion, and at that point we'd be ready for a motion. So this was just meant as a discussion.
I would add that I was involved when we resurfaced this previously and put in the rumble strips on the side, because we were so concerned about cars passing on the right. And so South Street is a very unusual residential street with those rumble strips on the edge, and that was for concern of the bikes.
Yeah, thanks for the context on that. Alex, go ahead and we'll unmute you.
Sure. I just want to say that just beyond the view of this photo, there is a bus stop, and the parking ends. It's now no parking bike lane. And just to the right of this photo, there's 3 more parking spots. And then the parking ends and it's no parking bike lane. So while I understand the idea that swerving in and out of bike lanes, this is the only parking on the north side of South Street for a good section. So while I understand people's just saying that it may not make sense at this point, this is a very isolated section of parking within all of the north side of South Street.
Okay, good. Thank you for the context. Appreciate it. Any other members of the commission have any comments on this? I think what I've heard is that there is an appetite to explore parking protected bike lanes on this stretch because it's so wide. If we were to make a modification directly in front of 227, as we're discussing, we would remove the time and we would install 2 spaces and not 1. So I just want to make sure that we're all in agreement on that. We can certainly talk at a future meeting about ideas for parking protected bike lanes in this stretch. Does anyone else have any comments? Randy, go ahead.
I'm not limited to parking protected bike lanes. We could do in any number of bike lanes on that spot, but appropriate infrastructure for bicycles along a busy road, South Street, I think is what I'm ultimately looking for. I thought this may be an opportunity to do something smaller and gentler. But if something bigger is going to happen, I think this is clearly an area that we can focus on and pay attention to as whatever is going to happen proceeds.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any further discussion on this? Seeing none, we will be back at a future meeting, potentially with an ordinance change after we have an internal discussion around, sort of taking all these comments into play. So thank you for the discussion on this. Next up is discussion of a traffic calming request for Drusen Drive. So this traffic calming request was submitted to us in October of 2023. The resident concerns is that cars and trucks are driving 40 miles an hour on our street. I have a few notes on Drusen Drive, and then I'll turn it over to the chief for the data that his department collected. Also want to recognize Councillor Labarge, who was with us this afternoon. So welcome, Councillor Labarge. I'm just going to run through some data here, and the chief will run through his data. And then you're welcome to add your comments. So Drusen Drive is approximately 1,260 feet long. It is 28 feet wide. There are no sidewalks on Drusen Drive. Parking's allowed on both sides of the street for its entire length, and there is no official speed regulation on the street, which means it does not have a posted speed limit. Chief, would you be willing to give us the speed data and collision data that you have collected, please?
Yes, thanks, Donna. This request was on October 19th, 2023. The collision data, there was a 5-year collision analysis conducted in October of 2023. There was 0 collisions reported. The speed and volume data, covert speed data was collected from July 23rd through July 30th, 2024 in the area of 83 Drusen Drive. During this time, 429 vehicles were measured. The street does not have an official speed regulation. The average speed was 16 miles an hour, and the 85th percentile speed was 19.8 miles per hour. The 85th percentile speed is widely used traffic statistical measure of the speed at or below, which is 85% of the drivers traveling on the road segment.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. So first I want to recognize Councillor Labarge. Thank you for being with us this afternoon, and go ahead, Councillor.
To Director Donna Laskaya and Chief of Police John Cartledge, and also the 4 citizens that belong to this, and our counselor from Ward 2, and Alex Jarrett is on vacation. So I'm going to start off. You know, I've heard about Drusen Drive. I know my streets for over 25 years. And this is what I'm going to talk about. I did talk with the resident a couple of days ago about how she applied for this. And she had told me that there was problems with one certain individual, a middle-aged woman, taking care of an older man, but also telling me also on Drusen Drive of 3 young men who on Drusen Drive speed coming out of it. But now I have another problem with this. If you come in from Ryan Road into O'Donnell Drive, and then you hang in and go straight, and you become into Caroline Drive. Drusen Drive is the first street to the right. You go around the street to the end of Drusen Drive onto Caroline Terrace. From Portsmouth Road into Caroline Lane and Drusen Drive, to the left, come around to Drusen Drive to the end until Caroline Terrace. There is a V, just like this, which can be a problem. If you look at the road very, very carefully, I've been there many, many times. I don't know how long Chief Cartledge has been around that area. I cannot answer for that, but there is a problem here. And I have to say that. We have no speed limits on Caroline Terrace at all, coming in for Pertsburt Road. We also have no speed limits coming in from Pertsburt Road at all. That's a problem here. We do have a lot of traffic on Caroline Terrace, period, coming from both ways. And I know, Chief, I know what's happening there. What I'm asking for is that we look at this very, very carefully. No sidewalks. I have many elderly people on Caroline Terrace coming in off from Ryan Road into O'Donnell Drive, go into Drusen Drive. And I just talked to Mrs. Skabinski yesterday, Joan, and she said, yes, it's terrible. They're coming in from both ends and traveling very fast, our pickup trucks and cars. I cannot answer for 2003. I've already been told by that resident and about the situation with the young woman who does speed, taking care of that elderly man, and also about these teenagers. I cannot answer to that. I have heard a different story a couple of days ago from one of the residents on Drusen Drive who said they're young guys, yes, but she said she's never had a problem with them. So I can't get involved in that part. My main concern is the biggest problem we're having is that O'Donnell Drive and Caroline Terrace coming in both ways are a serious problem. No speed limits, period. So what my request is, for the safety of all the people on O'Donnell Drive, Caroline Terrace, and Drusen Drive, that they're put into a safe situation, all of them. We need speed limits there, definitely. So that's my thoughts, and I'm bringing it out as a city councilor. I'm an honest city councilor. I know what's going through there. The police can't be there 8 hours a day, period. I need to look at the safety, and I do hear them telling me there's no speed limits, and they're correct. So that's what I'm presenting today, just not Drusen Drive here. That's altogether different for me. It's the amount of speeding that I am being told just 2 days ago. 2 days ago, no speed limit. And I think that visibility would hopefully change what's happening between those 3 streets. That's it.
Thank you, Counselor. Appreciate the comments. It's very helpful to us to have context. Any members of the commission have any comments on Drusen Drive for us? Any questions about the data that we have collected? Randy, go ahead.
My comment is I was thinking of the thing that I think Alex brought up earlier is that that process or that designation of a safety area, especially in that neighborhood, in that whole neighborhood. There's a lot of twisting and turning and stuff that goes around that whole area between Ryan Road and Bird's Pit. I live fairly close to there. I'm wondering if there's some subset of that or something that we could do that would just allow that as he discussed, that deals with speeding in those areas.
Okay, thanks, Randy. Go ahead, Councilor Clemmer.
Yeah, I'm just curious, what is the speed limit there since it's not posted?
25 miles an hour.
Okay. I mean, would it be worth it just to put some signs up or put a sign up and so people are aware? It seems like most people are going under the speed limit, but you know, something like that just to make sure people are aware of what it is.
Yeah, we could, so there is a difference between the statutory 25-mile-an-hour speed limit and a regulatory speed limit, which is the result of a speed study. So that would be the black and white sign that we see. The 25 mile an hour is something that the city opted into in roads that are considered thickly settled. So it's sort of a de facto speed limit. Used to be 30. It has been reduced to 25 miles an hour. So it's something we could contemplate, different type of signage for areas like this that don't have an official speed regulation.
Thank you.
Any other comments from members of the commission? Okay, Alex, go ahead.
I was just wondering if someone could explain the difference between statutory and regulatory speed limits and how they're enforced.
I can't speak to the enforcement, but what I can speak to is the difference between regulatory and a statutory or de facto speed limit. So regulatory speed limit is the result of a speed study by an engineering firm that collects data, turning movements and movements of vehicles at various times of day, takes that data, analyzes it in a way that is acceptable to Mass DOT, and then submits their findings to Mass DOT along with a recommendation for a speed limit. Mass DOT then approves that study and approves the suggested speed limit, and at that point, it becomes a speed regulation. There are many streets in Northampton for which a speed study has never been done because they are either not that heavily traveled, they're dead ends, they're cul-de-sacs, they're, newer streets with a smaller population. And by newer, I mean, not built 100 years ago. And those streets would have what's called a de facto speed limit, where you operate your vehicle with reasonable and proper care. It used to be 30 miles an hour. And the Municipal Modernization Act that was passed some years ago gave municipalities the ability to opt in to a lower speed limit, which was 25 miles an hour in areas that are considered thickly settled. Thickly settled has a particular definition, and that definition has to do with housing density. So this particular area would be a 25 mile an hour zone. I will defer to the chief on enforcement around that.
Sorry, couldn't get off of mute. Yeah, we would enforce the similar way. If it's not a posted speed limit sign on the street, we would revert back to what Donna just said with a 25 mile an hour thickly settled speed limit for enforcement purposes.
Any further conversation around Drusen Drive? Devin, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of signs because I don't believe they control behavior, but this would be a small step that would make the residents feel like they were heard. The data certainly doesn't say they're speeding there. The accident rate is non-existent, but it's a small fix, and I would ask you to consider it just along that street because it might get the attention of the few errant drivers who are speeding, and that would be an action they might know.
Okay, thank you, Devin. Alex, is your hand still up or do you have another question?
Yeah, I was just gonna say this does meet it could possibly meet the criteria for a safety zone speed limit along K Lane Terrace. This street should be adjacent to land use that is likely to attract vulnerable road users, meaning there's dense population there and there's no sidewalks. So that would be vulnerable road users. The safety zone should contain one or more areas that have potential conflicts. There's T intersections here, and vulnerable road users that warrant a reduction in speeds. And there's driveways as well. And the minimum length of the safety zone should be a quarter mile. So it is 0.25 miles. So this does meet the criteria if the commission would recommend it to have a safety zone. And that establishes a regulatory speed limit and not a statutory speed limit.
Thank you, Alex. Any other comments from any members of the commission on this? Go ahead, Randy.
I think what Alex is talking about is it's just a potentially another tool in the toolbox for us that doesn't have all the overhead of doing studies, apparently. It just has to satisfy some physical criteria. So it's something for this that, well, we haven't had a request for the 1 Street other than from the city councilor, but this is the sort of thing that we could start considering as the third way to do it. If it meets the criteria from the program or statute or DOT rule, I'm not sure where that is, to have us to do.
Yep, thanks, Randy. And that's it, one of the reasons that we hear these traffic calming applications is because, the data doesn't necessarily tell the full story. And we like to take comments from as many people as possible, which helps us in our decision making around what actions to take, if any. So I certainly appreciate everyone's comments on this and Councilor Labarge's advocacy for her ward as always. Any other comments on this? And what we typically do is take all this information, sort of sort through it, and we will be back to the commission with some recommendations on what, if any, actions we may take in this area. So want to make sure there's no further comments on this. Okay, hearing and seeing none, Councilor Labarge, we will be in touch with you about what our intentions are and when this lands on a future agenda. So thank you so much for being with us this afternoon.
And thank you to the commission.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor. Take care.
Bye.
Okay, next up is a discussion of a traffic calming request for Prospect Avenue. And that's followed by a discussion of a traffic calming request for Jackson Street. So we placed both of these on the agenda. They're obviously in the same neighborhood. Want to hear from folks in the area. And we'll start with the discussion of the traffic calming request for Prospect Avenue. And then I'll have a few comments on this. So this was submitted to us in November of 2023. The residents' concerns were speeding cars. I have a few engineering notes and then a few general comments. Prospect Avenue is approximately 2,940 feet long, and it is 24 feet wide. There are asphalt sidewalks on the west side from Prospect Street to number 52, and on the east side from Prospect Street to Ridgewood Terrace. There are double yellow center lines and marked crosswalks at the rail trail crossing and at the intersections with Bridge Road and Prospect Street. Parking is allowed on both sides of the street between Prospect Street and Bridge Road. The posted speed limit, so that's a regulatory speed limit, is 30 miles an hour. The connector roadway between North Elm Street and Prospect Street was changed to one-way travel in the northerly direction on March 4th, 1993. Chief, would you mind walking us through the collision and speed data, please?
Yep, thanks, Donna. A 5-year collision analysis was conducted in November of 2023. There were 22 collisions reported. 15 of those collisions occurred at the intersection with Prospect Street and Prospect Avenue. It is notable that 14 of the 15 collisions at Prospect Street and Prospect Avenue involved a vehicle on Prospect Avenue headed northbound that stopped at the stop sign, then pulled out in front of a vehicle traveling west. The speed and volume data. A covert speed data was collected from August 31st, 2024 to September 7th, 24 in the area of number 130 Prospect Avenue. During this time, the speeds of 9,030 vehicles were measured. The posted speed limit is 30 miles an hour. The average speed was 31 miles per hour, and the 85th percentile speed was 35.9 miles per hour. Those are essentially the data that we pulled.
Okay, thanks, Chief. And as he mentioned, when the chief and I look at the data that we pull on these streets, we look for patterns. We say, like, are people crashing in the same spot? Are they making the same turning or stopping movements? You know, what are we seeing for patterns and why? And then how do we fix that? Just another comment on this area, as I mentioned, Jackson Street is the next item on the agenda. We've heard public comment around the high school project, and we are aware that changes to the high school area may impact traffic in this area. So we are looking at traffic in an entire radius around the high school in order to ensure that we don't have any negative impacts as a result to any changes we would make near the high school. So we do have our engineering consultants already looking at the intersection of Prospect and Jackson Street, and potentially that entire corridor. So I'd like to recognize Councillor Moulton, who is with us this afternoon. Welcome, Councillor.
Thank you, Director LaScaglia. Yes, both of these are in Ward 1. The only thing I would add on Prospect Avenue, specifically, I was contacted again this week by a household that lives close to the intersection with Prospect, and their concern is about speeding, particularly at the end of the school day. Students leaving either of the high schools in that area. They have notified police department. I believe Chief Cartledge is aware of this, about that particular time of day. So that's the only additional information that I have.
Thank you, Councillor. Appreciate that. Does anyone on the commission have any comments for us about this area or questions about the data that we collected? And is anyone here from the public who wishes to speak to us about this street? Okay, Alex, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
As a frequent user of the rail trail, this is the second most scary intersection other than North Maple Street, mostly because the cars traveling from the Bridge Road direction, do have limited visibility because of a bump in the road, so it's hard for them to see, and they are often going quite quickly from that direction. So I just wanted to point out that information about this particular crossing of the rail trail.
Thanks, Alex. Next is Mara. I'm sorry if I did not pronounce that correctly.
That's okay. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm here because I live at 33 Prospect Avenue, so just 4 houses away from that intersection. And I joined the meeting today because I was really glad to see this on the agenda. My own, someone in my family was in an accident there. I have a student at the high school, and I see many students coming home at that time of day. So I appreciate the note about the timing. But yeah, I was surprised to see the data, because it does seem to me like there are many more people speeding than that data reveal. But if there's anything to be done, I don't know what the range of options is, but I would be very much in support of that. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Next is Marvin.
Hi, thank you. Appreciate everyone for being here and taking the time for this. My wife was actually in an accident at this intersection, driving up Prospect Ave when somebody was driving up Prospect Street and somebody was turning from the hospital onto Prospect Ave and didn't stop at the stop sign. So I am very much aware that this intersection is not always the most straightforward to go to. And I appreciate you all just taking a look at it. That's it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Next is Gina.
Good afternoon. Thank you for this hearing and the time. I live close to the intersection of Jackson Street and Prospect Street on Murphy Terrace. I've lived on Murphy Terrace for 30 years, and the current four-way stop is much better than the old two-way stop, but I think there's still some work to be done to make it a lot more safe for pedestrians and cyclists and for motorists. As I read through the materials for the hearing, I saw that one of the requests that was filed said that drivers are concerned about taking their turn. When is their turn to make that turn through that intersection of Jackson and Prospect? And the problems that creates are for pedestrians who are in the middle of crossing or don't know that it's safe to cross because of drivers aren't paying attention. The drivers don't see cyclists even if they're right next to them at the stop sign, they don't see them in the intersection. And so yes, it's a problem for the children going to Jackson Street, the children going to the high school. And because people speed along from, let's say, from the Finn Street end of Prospect up to Jackson Street, in that last block from, let's say, Metasoid and Adair, there's a lot of stuff happening, and drivers are concerned about getting to that stop sign. So there's lots of parking on the sides of both sides of Prospect. There's the street that I live on. There's a street next to the Adair, the street that next to the one that I live on, that people are trying to get, in and out of. My particular street, Murphy Terrace, is so close to the intersection that I have to look forward and backwards if I'm trying to take a left turn onto my street, because people are just aren't paying attention to there's a car stopped in front of them 5 feet from when they turn that intersection, while I'm waiting for the cars in front of me to give me a space to turn into my street. So the problem with the intersection isn't just the intersection. There's, in that block leading up to Jackson Street, there's the childcare, where parents are dropping off and picking off their young people, opening car doors, and the street gets narrower. And it's at the same time that people are in the afternoon, in the morning, where people are rushing to get home or to work or wherever it is that they're going. So I hope that if whatever action you take takes into account that whole block leading up to the intersection.
Yeah, thank you for your comments, Gina. I appreciate it. And we'll actually discuss this intersection at the next agenda item, which is Jackson Street. But appreciate your comments.
Sorry.
And
I thought
that's
that's where
okay.
we were.
I appreciate your comments. And I want to finish up Prospect Ave, and then we'll move on to Jackson Street. Okay, next is Christian. So just want to bring us back to Prospect Avenue here for a minute. So go ahead, Christian.
Yes, hello. Thank you. I had a couple things I wanted to add. I'm a resident of Prospect Avenue, and so had plenty of time to observe the traffic over the last decade. And one of the issues besides the intersection with Prospect Street is that the sidewalk doesn't go the whole way. And so you get children walking to Jackson Street School and dog walkers and others, that when there's a lot of snow, like we had a couple of weeks ago, they have to walk in the street. And then the combination with occasionally people speeding, which unfortunately does happen quite a bit, gets a little dangerous because the street is narrower, people are walking in the street, and then you get, some cars going fast. And so I feel like extending the sidewalk could alleviate that problem. And then aside from that, there's just in general, the speeding seems to get worse once, well, let me back up. Occasionally there's one of those trailer signs that measures people's speed as they go by. You know, and it says, you know, whatever your speed is this much over the speed limit. And that seems to work when it's around. But it hasn't been around in a couple of years. And then I notice, oh yeah, the speeds are, you know, people are ignoring the speed limit again. And so it'd be great to bring that back. Yeah, so those are two things that I think haven't been mentioned and would be important to consider, given that there are a lot of people walking to the bike path or to the school. And then I wanted to also mention the other end of Prospect Avenue, the intersection with Bridge Road. So with Bridge Road, it's less of a problem getting out of Prospect. It's more people turning into Prospect. So I actually got rear-ended there once. I was on Bridge Road. I had stopped to turn into Prospect, and Bridge Road was during the busy commuter time.
Sorry, it's been 2 minutes.
Sorry. Can I tell my story, or is that too long?
Yeah, Christian, we try to just limit
All
comments
right.
to 2 minutes, and
All right.
yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Brett, go ahead. Where'd you go, Brett? Oh, there you are.
Thank you. Thank you. Brett Constantine, Florence. Thanks for bringing this up. It sounds like there's clearly a speed problem, although it's, you know, the data presented is different than we usually see in these instances, I feel like, because it's clear that, so more than half of the drivers are over the speed limit, which seems significant and noteworthy. And for that, usually we see the 85th percentile, which isn't a mark that I generally like to use as a benchmark, but in this case I find very interesting, is not significantly higher. It's just a few miles an hour higher. So it feels like there's a lot of people going 30 to 35, which is over the speed limit. And I'm not sure what the commission would like to do to try to slow the speed down, but I would appreciate anything that they can do since there are so many crossings and pedestrians. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. Any other members of the public have any observations on Prospect for us? All right, Nancy, go ahead.
So if I'm understanding correctly, the DPW is already working on this general area because of the high school situation. So we are making some good strides towards understanding what might be the best approach, because we have an engineering firm involved in this.
Yeah, we have an engineering firm specifically studying the four-way intersection of Prospect, Jackson, Woodlawn. They're specifically studying that intersection. My inclination is that the scope of that work is likely going to expand based on the data that we've seen on Prospect Ave. And I also wanted to have this conversation about Jackson Street, which is next on the agenda, because I want to make sure we have you know, public input and sort of comments from the people in the area while we have an engineering firm in the area. So yes, we already have an engineering firm in the area, and we may be expanding their scope.
Thank you. Thanks for the clarification on that.
Any other comments from anyone on Prospect Avenue? And just to go back to the comment that we received about the intersection with Bridge Road, I agree that that is a really tough intersection and something that we are going to be also looking at. So thank you for that specific comment. It is truly warranted. Any other comments from anyone on the commission on this stretch of roadway? Okay, Debin, go ahead.
Just a comment that I was struck by the accident numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. That's what we would consider a cluster for sure. Okay, next up is a discussion of traffic calming request for Jackson Street. This particular request has come to us multiple times, submitted by multiple people. Quite a flurry of activity towards the end of 2023. Resident concerns include that traffic should be slowed to prevent potential accidents, especially when children are going to and from the Jackson Street School. And then we have received countless complaints about the four-way intersection with Woodlawn and Prospect Street. The general concerns, as articulately stated by Gina in her comment, is that drivers are more focused on whose turn it is to go through the intersection, and they are not checking for pedestrians, and that creates potential for conflict. So I have a couple of engineering comments on this. Jackson Street is approximately 3,390 feet long. It is 24 feet wide. There are existing sidewalks on the east side of Jackson Street for the entire length. We have double yellow center lines. We have painted white edge lines. We have marked crosswalks at the intersections with Prospect Street, Bridge Road, and 2 raised crosswalks by the Jackson Elementary School. There are some parking prohibitions. The speed limit is 30 miles an hour. And as I mentioned, there is a 4-way stop control at the intersection of Jackson, Woodlawn, and Prospect Street. Stop control was implemented on November 7th, 2013. We currently have an engineering firm looking at the feasibility of installing some sort of roundabout in this location. Not necessarily a conventional roundabout, more like a peanut-shaped roundabout that would significantly slow traffic and enable better movement of cars and pedestrians through the intersection. As many of you may be aware, the Complete Streets Ordinance requires that anytime we're looking at an intersection treatment, that we examine the feasibility of a roundabout. And that's what our engineering firm has been doing for us. We have to make sure, is this even geometrically possible? And it appears, based on preliminary survey, that some style, some shape of roundabout is actually geometrically possible here without eminent domain takings. And that's the information that we need in order to move forward productively with some sort of discussion around what can we do for treatment at this intersection. The reason that we wanted to have the traffic calming request for Jackson Street on this agenda, as I mentioned, is we want to look at the entire corridor. So we need to look at the intersection and we need to look at the corridor. Chief, would you mind running us through the data that you collected, please?
Yes. The collision data, a 5-year collision analysis was conducted in August of 2023 for the intersection of Jackson Street at Prospect Street and Woodlawn Avenue. There were 7 collisions reported, 6 involved 2 vehicles and 1 involved a vehicle and a bicyclist. A 5-year collision analysis was also conducted in November 2023 for Jackson Street and does not include the previous mentioned intersection. In this case, there were 12 collisions reported. 6 of the collisions occurred at the intersection with Barrett Street. Speed and volume data, covert speed data was collected from August 15th to August 21st, 2024 on Jackson Street. During this time, the speeds of 36,085 vehicles were measured. The posted speed limit is 30 miles per hour. The average speed was 31 miles per hour, and the 85th percentile speed was 34.1. Those are the facts that I have.
Okay, thank you, Chief. And I just want to go back to the work that our engineering firm is doing at this intersection. Again, everything is preliminary. We have to do survey work to sort of understand the geometry and the topography that we're working with. And that is what is currently underway. We need to fully understand what our options are before we can determine any sort of path forward. It's clear that the four-way intersection has really what I would call large expanse of asphalt. It's very sort of confusing for everybody. And we need to look to make improvements to it, particularly in light of the improvements we're going to be making to the Route 9 corridor. Councilor Moulton, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I want to speak particularly to the intersection. I live on Perkins, not far from it. I have been a frequent user of the intersection, in both as a motorist and a pedestrian. So I have my own experience, but I have have heard from many residents of that neighborhood over the last 3 years about their concerns about the safety of pedestrians in the crosswalks. I think it's the intersection in Ward 1 that I've heard the most concern about pedestrian safety. There are, in addition to the four-way stop, there are 3 crosswalks at that intersection. So motorists, as both Director Liscaya and Gina stated, motorists are attempting to figure out when it's their turn to go through the four-way stop, while also having to pay secondarily attention to, depending on whether they're turning or going straight through, to potential pedestrians in either in 1 or 2 crosswalks. Obviously it's heavily used by students going both to Jackson Street and Northampton High School. So the pedestrians, the young people who are crossing through that intersection are having to potentially look at, again, depending on turners, motorists who are turning, look at 3 streets to be sure that their way is cleared. It's very dark as well later in the day or in the evening, and that just increases the problems there. So I like I like the fact that the engineering firm is looking at the possibility of a roundabout. That's a perhaps a more a longer term solution. I do think that we have to look at some ways to on a very short term look at how we can improve the safety for pedestrians there. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Counselor. Charlotte, I see your hand up and I will get to you in a moment. I just don't want you to have to keep your hand raised like that. Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, I'm Nick Horton. I'm from Prospect Street. I'm very familiar with both the Prospect Avenue and the Jackson Woodlawn intersections. I think one of the key things for both of these is really those crossings. The rail trail on Prospect Avenue is a place because of that lower visibility we saw, and obviously the Jackson Street along the entire way, given the large number of numbers we saw from the speed and vehicle volume data. This is a very heavily used intersection. I have experience from before when it was a 2-way stop and Prospect Street was allowed to kind of proceed unhindered, and it was very fast, very dangerous to cross Prospect on that intersection to head over to Nettleman's and the Y coming in from the school. And so things got better, but I agree, I've had 2 situations where as a pedestrian, I've always almost been hit. So I'm really excited to hear about creative ways to be thinking about re-engineering that intersection. But again, we have really wide street on Prospect, which makes it even harder. And whether there's other ways of kind of narrowing that even a little bit further would really help. Again, it's challenging, it's dogleg, but I'm excited to hear about the peanut idea.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Marvin, go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate Councilor Moulton's and Gina and Nick's your comments. I live on Prospect Heights, which is literally baseball's throw from that intersection. I am through that intersection on my car or walking multiple times most days. And I have stopped counting the number of times that my car or my body walking with my dog have been almost hit. It is just, as you all know, it is a very dangerous intersection with people trying to do multiple things at once while they're driving. So I also agree with the comment that with the two-way became a four-way stop, it did improve. So I'm hopeful that we can do something also temporary to even increase that, the safety of that intersection, because I understand it takes a while for the engineering firm to make their recommendation and then to go through the process of implementing something. So I am looking forward to hearing more comments about this, and I actually am excited by the idea that there is somebody engaged to deal with this, perhaps with a roundabout or another way to deal with this dangerous intersection. So again, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Charlotte, I'm gonna unmute you. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Thanks very much. My name's Charlotte Corsten and I live on Jackson Street. I think Stan summarized very nicely all of our concerns in the neighborhood. I think we can all say that we've had near misses more than once at the intersection. So it's exciting to hear the news about the engineers and investigations. However, I would really like to request that short-term solutions are found for increasing pedestrian visibility at the intersection. I think there are some of the traffic calming request forms that were submitted point out the issues at normal times at peak hours, also when it rains or it's dark. People are just not seen when they're crossing the road. And so flashing lights or something similar would really help increase visibility, and we kindly request that those options are considered. Regarding Jackson Street, the amount of traffic that goes along the street every day is just incredible. One of the things that should be noted with Jackson Street is that this street is quite narrow, which means that the sidewalks are very close to the cars. And this is because there's not much of a sidewalk either. It's quite thin at the top of Jackson Street. So when you've got kids walking home or to school, playing around, it really is nerve-wracking watching them because the risks are really great that something could happen in the future. So again, it would be wonderful to find a solution for decreasing these risks. For example, reducing the speed limit could help a little bit. I'm open to hearing other suggestions too. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Next is Julia.
Hi, my name is Julia Reisman. I live on Prospect Street. In fact, I live with Nick, and he was nearly killed on crossing the street. So he said it was a near accident, but it was the car that's far away, turning, not paying attention to pedestrians, paying attention to whether there'd be a car coming because of the four-way stop and confusion and not paying attention. I agree with everything everyone has said. Yes, it would be lovely to have a roundabout and to have engineers do that work. And also, let's think about what we can do immediately for temporary solutions to raise driver awareness, driver light, and to help protect the kids get to school. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Julia. Okay, I don't see any other members of the public. Nancy, go ahead.
I was curious, when we're looking at the accidents, the type of accidents, Chief, was there something in particular that stood out for the cause of the accidents?
I don't have the specific data in front of me, Nancy. Some of the ones that were at Jackson and Barrett, I would think cars turning off of Barrett Street would have been significant, but I'm not sure if speeding was an issue for the people on Jackson or what I don't have the actual accidents right in front of me.
The reason why I'm asking is because it seems that inattentive driving, maybe from what people are saying, I know that intersection like a lot of us do. It's so busy even approaching that intersection, let alone once you get there, that there's just so many different distractions. So I would think that inattentive driving, also on top of that, with people feeding in from both schools also, just the amount of traffic is phenomenal, as what was pointed out before. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, one thing that I've always noticed going through this intersection is the entrance to Child's Park. And it's just a little ramp and not much other than that. And it seems like a very natural place for people to enter from Jackson Street and from Prospect. So I was wondering if Child's Park could be collaborated with around this entrance.
Okay, interesting point. Thank you. Randy, go ahead.
Yeah, again, I hear a lot of the concerns. I drive through that area regularly as well. One of the things that I was thinking about that maybe could be a temporary, I love the idea of a roundabout there. An oddly shaped one would be even more interesting. I'm wondering if in the short term there might be something that can do to create essentially curb extensions on the four corners of Prospect and Jackson/Woodlawn to extend that space to give more protection to pedestrians and to help folks be more aware of what is going on in that area, which would have obviously the tendency to narrow the street a little bit there and also help pedestrians be safely more visible as they approach the crosswalk.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. And with the nicer weather coming, I have a lot more flexibility to put things in the middle of the road and do trials with concrete blocks. And we've certainly done that in various locations over the past couple of years. So I'm definitely open to suggestions around that as the winter season winds down. Okay, Marvin, go ahead.
Hi, the only extra thought I had was that when I worked at UMass years ago, they put a roundabout near the parking lot where I worked on, and it was great for traffic. It was actually horrendous for pedestrian crossing because cars just looked and kept going and they didn't stop. So I just want to point out that when we do consider putting that roundabout or something in, that extra attention be where the actual pedestrian crossing is in relationship to the cars turning, to make sure that the cars have plenty of time to see the pedestrians in the crosswalk.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Thank you, Marvin. Good point. Devin, go ahead.
I'm going to echo that comment. I'm going to wait and see your engineering work before I make up my mind here, but at least the cars are coming to a stop at the intersection. So you're going to have higher speed traffic when you put in a roundabout than you are when they come to a stop. So I'm a little cautious about that. And I know for a temporary solution, you don't want to spend engineering money doing a modification that you're going to abandon, but possibly to paint down the necks on those intersections so that somebody's standing in a white box waiting to try to get across might be something to consider.
Yep. Thank you, Devin. Any other comments on this intersection or on Jackson Street in general? My expectation of next steps on this is that I will have some sort of engineering rendering on this probably this summer to share with the commission. So we will be back here further discussing this area. Brett, go ahead.
Thank you. The only comment I have at this time is that narrowing the entry to the intersection from all 4 points for vehicles seems to be the way to go, whether you are going with a roundabout or a four-way stop. Narrowing the thing, narrowing how cars pass through that slows them down, and that's slowing down equals better safety for all. Thanks.
Yep, thank you for the comment. Agreed. Charlotte, I see your actual hand up. Let me unmute you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. Do you think it's feasible to implement something at the intersection as we gear into sort of like the season when more people are walking to and fro?
I think minimally, I will be redeploying the pedestrian markers that go right in the middle of the street on the double yellow center lines, and sort of, catch drivers' eyes in a way that, there's nothing there now. So this is a good time of year, probably 2 more weeks, I'll have those deployed throughout the city when I feel like we're not, in the middle of de-icing operations anymore. So that's sort of a minimal effort that we can do. And then I need to look a little more closely at what I can do with barriers, and how that might play out. The one concern I have with deploying barriers is that I have to remove them in November. So we want to be careful to not, you do something sort of as an experiment and everyone gets used to it. And then one day, they sort of drive the road and everything's gone and it has to be gone. So that's just something we want to be mindful of. But I think this is an area that we can take a little bit of a closer look at, but minimally we will have pedestrian markers out. Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, the scored concrete, what role does that play? What benefit is that providing to traffic right now? Because that seems to be one of the biggest issues, is that it is wide. And can that be easily removed?
Scored concrete needs to be excavated out. So that's there's a level of effort around that excavation, and then repaving. The idea behind scored concrete is that it communicates to motorists that they're not supposed to be in that particular location because it's an undesirable vibration, as well as a noise. So it's sort of a tactic to keep cars, out of a particular area, but there is a level of effort that involves saw cutting and repaving that's certainly a budgetary consideration. Any other go ahead, Alex, do you have a follow-up question? Or is I'll unmute you. I'm not sure if your hand is still up or.
Yeah, I was just I was just trying to understand, in terms of this intersection particularly, why are vehicles supposed to stay off those areas?
I would imagine, I was not involved in the design of the current intersection, but it's a tactic to take a very wide area and try to shrink it without actually putting in a physical barrier that would be problematic for drainage. So I can't speak to the exact reasons for its installation, but that's generally what it is used for.
Thank you.
Okay, Marvin, go ahead.
Sorry to keep adding comments. I love the idea of narrowing the roads. I'm wondering if there's the level of bicycles will probably increase as the weather goes, just to make sure that it's not too narrow for the cars and bicycles to occupy near space at the same time.
Yeah, thank you for the comment. I hear you. Okay, any other comments on this area of the street? As I mentioned, probably be back to the commission within a few meetings with some sort of rendering around this. I do need to wrap up this agenda item so we can get to the final agenda item, which is the chief's annual traffic safety report. So I just want to make sure there's no one else who has any comments for us on this area. Charlotte, I see your hand up. If you could, go ahead.
Sorry, just one quick question. Regarding the speed limit on Jackson Street, is it feasible in the, the next year or so to reduce the speed limit?
So there is a regulatory speed limit on Jackson Street, and in order to reduce a speed limit, a new speed study has to be completed and then approved by Mass DOT, and that's generally a 5-figure level of effort with an engineering firm. And something that we don't typically undertake. We would tend to undertake physical improvements to the roadway rather than signage, with a different speed limit on it, which may or may not be effective. We would tend to invest city resources in, something that would actually physically impede speeding. Rather than signage, but there is an engineering process around changing speed limits that is lengthy and expensive. Any other comments on this area for us before we move on? Okay, thank you to everyone from the public who came and provided comments. It's very helpful to us, so we appreciate that. Okay, last item on our agenda is the annual traffic safety report from Chief Cartledge. Go ahead, Chief.
Thanks, Donna. I appreciate it. So this is my annual traffic safety report that I'm required to do by the city ordinance. So I'm just going to run through some of the highlights, and then if anyone would like a copy or has questions at the end, feel free to ask. Last year, 2024, our department issued 3,203 motor vehicle citations. 2,523 were warnings. 318 had a civil fine attached. 260 were a criminal complaint, which means someone was summoned to court for a criminal violation. And 102 of those were an arrest was made by one of our officers. The next section is operating under the influence, OUI. So last year, our department made arrested or summons 60 drivers for OUI. 57 of those were for alcohol. 3 were for drug-related offenses. 11 were subsequent offenses, which means the person had a guilty offense prior. 24 of those were Northampton residents, and 24 of the OUIs had a breathalyzer test refusal. We'll move on to collisions. In 2024, our department investigated 511 motor vehicle accidents. Of those collisions, 421 involved personal injury or property damage, which was in excess of $1,000. 78 were motor vehicle with injury. 409 were motor vehicle collisions with property damage. We had 2 fatal pedestrian accidents and 14 where pedestrians were injured. On the next section, so in total, there were, like I said, 511, and 421 of those were with personal injury or totaled over $1,000, which triggers the mandate to report it to the registry and your insurance company and to the police. We had the Mass Municipal Road Safety Program grant for $39,195.75. Each section of the year, there's a different campaign that the grant requires we focus on. So the first one was the winter impaired driving. We made 56 stops. April distracted driving, 138 stops. May was the click it or ticket, 163 stops. June speeding, 132 stops. July speeding, 157 stops. And the summer impaired, 29 stops. So this grant allows us to put extra patrols on the road to focus on these, and it doesn't take away from our normal patrols and traffic activity. So that's a great benefit for our department because we do have so many traffic enforcement requests from the public. On the next page. So this just continued into December, winter impaired 61 stops, and then we're into this year right now, which we get the same grant for. And some of the recommendations that I have are to reapply for this grant every year. Apply grant funding specific to pedestrian and bicycle safety, child passenger restraint systems. We do have 2 technicians here who install child safety passenger seats. We also want to continue a strong focus on OUI enforcement, especially on the overnight shift where many of those are located. Continue to support the efforts of the Transportation and Parking Commission by collecting speed data and crash data for the commission, and continue directed traffic enforcement efforts. So just a note on that, each time an officer comes on duty, the dispatcher has preloaded traffic enforcement requests loaded into the computer system, and they will remind each officer in each of their patrol districts where they need to focus, what the request is for, if it's speeding or electronic devices or whatever it may be. And if the officer is not on a call, they will be directed to conduct their specific traffic enforcement. And we have them in all the different patrol areas of the city, and we continue to add to those too. So we have quite a list going. But that's essentially the yearly report I'm required to do and present to the Traffic Commission. So I don't know if there's any questions or comments. I'd be happy to answer anything.
Thanks, Chief. I just want to say thanks for your efforts in supporting this commission, and you collect an awful lot of data for us, and it's very much appreciated. Randy, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chief. I appreciate the data, especially on collisions and other things. I would be interested in possibly periodically hearing about specific more details about specific, maybe representative or difficult areas that less involved how many crashes, but the style of what happened in a specific accident. There's a fair amount of that, I think. I'm not sure it came to this group around the bicycle accident that happened near the high school, but I think that would be, and I would trust you or your officers to talk to us a little bit about some of the conditions or what may be happening. So we just start to get a little bit familiar with what folks are facing out in the thing as a learning process for us.
Thanks, Randy. In some of the newer requests for speed data and the collision data, I've been trying to write in more about what you just said, like how the accident occurred, who turned where, things like that. So I'll try to do that.
That would be really helpful for me to learn more about, again, what you're facing and what the community is facing. Thank you.
Yep, definitely. You're welcome.
Okay, any other comments from anyone on the commission? Okay, Alex, I see your hand up. We'll unmute you. Go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Chief Cartledge. I met with you at Tandem Bagel last fall regarding the trend of larger trucks having tires that are called poke, which is tires extending beyond their fenders. So as I am often bicycling in traffic, I see those tires right next to me spinning very quickly, which is a very dangerous situation. I know that this is an issue that is covered in law where they need to be inside the fenders or have mud flaps. But I see this, this wasn't an issue 5 years ago. This is something that's relatively new with these large trucks that are now getting lifted and having wide tires. I was wondering if you have any enforcement you know, I've tried to speak to the state police. I've tried to speak to representatives. They point me to, well, it's a safety inspection issue. But you know, we continue to see these issues. It is really, you know, it is really scary for someone who is, you know, just bicycling out there, seeing spinning tires on a 40-mile-per-hour road going by them that are exposed. You know, and cars do make mistakes. And I was just wondering what you think is an appropriate way to deal with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Definitely, if it's a regulated thing that vehicles, you know, should not be passing inspections, that'd be something for, you know, we could certainly look into that. If we found a vehicle that had a passing inspection that wasn't supposed to be, you know, passed, we could certainly go speak with the inspection station. I'd have to look closer at the law if that's actually like a first offense where we can stop for that. I believe it probably wouldn't be. We'd have to stop the vehicle for something else. But certainly if they were rejected for safety on an inspection sticker, that's, you know, a primary offense, and we could stop and look into that. So that's where, you know, we're at for that. We would be able to speak with the operator once we stop the car and go from there.
Okay, Jamie, did you have your hand up? Or, okay, all right, just checking. Alex, I'm not sure if you have a follow-up question or your hand is still raised. I'll unmute you real quick.
I know we have parking enforcement agents, and there's some things that they can handle in terms of calling regarding expired registrations or missing inspection stickers. Is that something else that could be possibly enforced via parking on the street? Or being reported by the parking enforcement officers?
I don't think they fall under that law. And certainly if someone called that a parked vehicle had a missing inspection sticker, you know, that's kind of a low priority call. But if the vehicle is unsafe, we'd obviously look into it a little more.
Parking enforcement will report an unregistered vehicle. That's pretty common. But as far as like inspection stickers, that's not something that parking enforcement becomes involved in.
Yeah, any other questions for the chief on his report? Okay. Hearing none, again, thanks, Chief, for your efforts around supporting this commission.
Thank you.
Okay, that completes our agenda items. Is there any new business? And hearing none, may I have a motion to adjourn, please?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, that's Councilor Clemmer. May I have a second, please?
Second.
Sorry, was that Nancy? Second is Nancy. Okay, very good. Is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none. Beth, please call the roll for us.
Donna,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Carolyn,
I think Carolyn lost her
Carolyn's
connection, Beth.
okay. Nancy,
Yes.
Deborah,
Yes.
Devin,
Yes.
Diana,
Yes.
Jamie,
Yes.
Randy.
Yes.
It's 8 yeses, unanimous.
Okay, thanks everyone, and we'll see you next month. Take care.
Thank you, Donna.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.